So the idea at the moment is the first module or the first big section
Yeah.
of the um, Exploring Godot, whatever we're going to call it, course. It's not going to be called Exploring Godot. Um, is going to be effectively a classic arcade, right? So we've got Minesweeper, we've got Spooky Bricks.
Yeah.
Maybe you put a Frogger in there, maybe put Snake, but just like to get started, and then from there we can start moving into um, more complex games and teaching different things. I mean, the problem with a course like this is my go-to is to find fun games to make, but actually what I need to do is find techniques we haven't covered yet and put them in the right order.
Yeah. That can always be a big challenge, because ultimately we don't want to just create tech demos.
Right.
So we want to make a compelling game, something that's interesting to play, but not just interesting to play, but interesting for you as a student to take and actually add something of your own to it, which can be challenging with some of the more simple games, because there's not much you can do initially anyway to add to certain games because they've already reached their natural end point.
Right. Like Minesweeper is a very simple little maths problem.
Mm.
Right. There's not much you can do that. We can change the graphics and stuff, but like power-ups doesn't make sense. There's a few other things I think could go in there, a platform or infinite runner.
Yeah.
I'm saying or because they're actually not very different. Maybe Pong, because that gives you both local multiplayer and a very simple NPC controller.
Yeah.
I don't really want to call it artificial intelligence because it's not changing its behavior depending on the state. It's just updating where it thinks it should be.
Yes.
And then, yes, as Roderick says, MMORPG with strategic elements in ultra-realistic sim environment with real-time economics and derivatives markets in a non-Euclidean space. No, we're not doing that.
Every beginner wants to make a MMO RPG or something ridiculously large.
I mean, it's a good sign, right? Someone plays something they love. They think, I want to make
Yeah.
something. So I've
Oh,
got this
totally.
idea. How do I do it? The problem is keeping that enthusiasm once you learn, don't. Like, just don't do this as a small team.
Well, this
If you want to
segues.
make the next, World of Warcraft or Star Wars Galaxies with EVE Online, have a couple of hundred people and a few $1 million.
Just to run the servers, let alone anything else. But this
Right.
goes back to what we were saying right at the very beginning about saying you can't do something to someone. That's potentially one of those moments where, in good faith, you've said to someone, "No, that's not a good idea," and then they lose all
Right.
sort
So
of
the
like
trick is saying,
encouragement for it.
not you can't do
Mm.
this, but you need more people.
And
It's nothing to do with
more dollar.
capability. It's understand how much work that is, right? It's like if you want to create something like GTA 7, because they're making GTA 6 apparently, and you decide you're going to make a recreation of London and it's going to be a living city. The amount of tiny details you need to put in just the map without any cars or AI or weather systems or anything like that,
Yeah.
just the map so it feels like a real city. That's a team of people.
There's a dinosaur button
Roderick,
apparently.
they didn't make MMO button. They added a make moo node. And when you press it, it just goes moo. We need a cow.
Do you? Do you really? Do you want a cow?
I sometimes wonder if it's more, if you want to do this right, make sure you have more than one person, because even something as comparatively simple as Stardew Valley, which was made by one person, that took how many years? I mean,
Wasn't it
9 or
4?
something?
Oh, was it? Oh, okay. I had 4 in my mind for some reason.
It might be 4, but like that's one person who knows what they're doing and is capable of creating all those assets, making something that comparatively simple, and that's still that much time.
And whether they realized it or not while they were doing it, they picked a genre of game that the tech wouldn't advance so much that their game would just look completely out of date. If they had started off doing a realistic MMORPG, and we've seen huge jumps in graphic fidelity over the years, well, that would have been out of date. within
I mean,
like 6
the other
months, let alone a year.
there's an interesting problem specifically with MMOs in that a good MMO is not just one style of game, right? Because people expect combat, possibly crafting, possibly housing, possibly decorating, possibly character creation, possibly mini games, possibly a casino area, not with real money, but with in-game stuff, role playing, racing, and each of those is effectively a game in its own right.
Yeah.
So when I was playing Guild Wars 2 a few months back, and I was hanging around the desert area, and they have fun little race events on their new mounts, and that's great. But that's a team of people. Like that's one project, and it has to somehow fit in with everything else.
And sadly, a lot of these games that do come out end up being popular for only a short time. And then if your player base is not resubscribing or there's not another form of income coming in, again, to run the server required to keep all of this up and running gets very expensive very quickly.
Or let's imagine you can do this.
Yep.
How are you going to add enough content for endgame players fast enough?
As one person.
I mean, Roderick's saying one
Yep.
person could do it if they have several centuries of free time. Sure. But that's assuming that everyone's still using the same operating systems.
Yeah,
Or that we're still here.
Very challenging very quickly.
Yeah. So yeah, going back to the idea, I'm still struggling with what the first game in that course is going to be, because I want it to be very, very simple. And in Discovering Godot, we did Looney Lips, which is a very simple word game based on Mad Libs. And the advantage there is we don't have to worry about things like moving characters, some very simple UI elements, an array, some prompts, a couple of nodes, and we're good to go, right? I want to do something of that kind of complexity that is intriguing and fun to play. Maybe a Pac-Man style game. I don't know.
Yeah. With a toucan going round going nom, 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 eating up the fruit of the forest.
Yeah, Rocco, you're right on the money. I mean, it is absolutely doable, and it's something you can work on. But if you want to create your own MMO in the way that Chris Robertson is doing with Star Citizen, you have to work in the industry and pay your dues and become Chris Robertson. Which I'm not saying, you can't do this. I'm saying that's not a starting project. That's
It's a few years
magnus
in.
opus.
Yeah.
That's your masterwork is what that is. If you want to make a masterpiece, you have to master the industry.
That's why I call it masterpiece. You have to be a master to make that piece. Makes sense.
It's from the old days of the apprenticeships.